Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another video on the History Value podcast. And today I'm joined by Dr. Suzanne Owen and Dr. Angela Puca. And I'll have the link to Angela Puca's YouTube channel, Angela Symposium, in the description below in the pinned comment. And today's topic is based on their book titled Pagan Religion in 5 Minutes. I will also have the link to purchase that book in the description below and in the pinned comment as well. And with that being said, thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for inviting us.
Thank you for joining me. So for my first question, what is paganism?
Do you want to take this on, Suzanne, or do you want me to?
You say that the chapter, you had written the chapter, although we conceived the book together. And so obviously we had to think about what the limits of paganism would be. So I can start. I'll just say very briefly that in this case, we are referring mainly to contemporary paganism primarily as a self-identity, rather than the use that was used by early Christian authors to denote the other, and also by some contemporary people to denote non-believers. So we're not excluding that, although some of the authors who contribute to the book do talk about ancient paganisms in relation to contemporary paganism, which obviously contemporary pagans draw from ancient cultures. So that's just the context of it. But in terms of, well, what is it? Angela, would you like to take over on that one?
Sure. So paganism is an umbrella term that refers to a set of different traditions that all have certain traits in common. And one of these traits is that there is an immanent view of the divine, which means that the divine is not seen as transcendent, which means above nature, above the world. Is not the divine is not something that has created the world and then stays outside of it. Is immanent, is imbued in everything that is around us. So this is an immanent view of the divine. Then there's also the perception that divine is both embodied in its feminine and masculine manifestations, although obviously in more recent years, which is something that I was also discussing at the University of Rome the other week, this idea of feminine and masculine that has been particularly evident in the early representations of Wicca and Gardnerian Wicca, this duodeistic aspect of divine as feminine and masculine, now has been expanded to understand it not in gendered terms necessarily, but more in terms of something that is projective in nature and something that is receptive in nature. So it's similar to when you think about a socket and a plug, and some people would say that there's the masculine part and the feminine part, but those are not really gendered. It's more about trying to understand in a way that is comprehensible what is the projective side and what is the receptive side. So there's that, and also there's an ethic that is really personal. So there isn't an ethic that is determined by a god or a divine punishment. It is very individually driven. There's also in the past and up until recently, I would say that another identifier of paganism was the idea that it was earth worshipping or earth centered, and there are now some forms of paganism that might not be so focused on the earth centered aspect or the earth worshipping aspect, but there is still a lot of emphasis across the different pagan traditions to the earth, nature, and a connection to nature seen as something that is of primary importance to the practice, to the theology, and to really the life of those who identify as pagans. Then there's also the landscape has a very important aspect in a pagan framework, because the landscape is what inhabits the spirits of the land. And there is very often in paganism polytheistic and animistic, and very often also pantheistic worldview. So it is a belief system where the divine is perceived, as I mentioned, with the immanent view of the divine. It sort of follows as a consequence that if the divine is in everything, then everything as a spirit, even objects and the land and trees and waterfalls. So everything has a spirit and everything is perceived to be divine. So if the aim is a sort of religious or spiritual connection, and naturally within an immanent view of the divine, you would want to connect with the landscape as well. So it means that it is not just about the community of people around you, but also the community of other than human persons, as other scholars have defined. So yes, I would say that these would be probably the main traits of paganism, but it could be considered as an umbrella term. And it is a term that is both emic and ethic. And for those who don't understand the difference between the two, the emic perspective is the perspective of the practitioner, the insider, and the ethic, which is spelled without the H, it's not ethic, it's ethic, is the perspective of the scholar or somebody that analyzes it from the outside. So in some cases, I would say that paganism can also be applied from an ethic perspective, because there are some people that may not self-identify as pagans, but they have all the traits and all they do all the things that would be classifiable as paganism from an analytical perspective.
Is paganism a religion?
I would say yes, but I don't know, Suzanne, what do you...
Yes, I did tackle that question in my chapter, and there is two ways of looking at that. One is if we are talking about groups being regarded as religions, like Christianity, Hinduism, and that kind of category, then paganism is a religion as well. On the other hand, it is a slippery term, and not every pagan practitioner would agree that what they're doing is a religion, but would rather see it as a philosophy or a way of life. And this is true actually of many practitioners of different religions. You often hear this among many people, obviously in indigenous religions, which have been who regard religion as a colonial institution, and so they distance themselves from the term. Well, likewise in paganism, many people, many members who've chosen to become pagan are attracted to it because it is less institutionalized from religion, and that's how they like it. They like the ability to be creative and imaginative without having to have a fixed structure of how they should engage, in the religion or tradition.
I would say that obviously whether paganism is a religion or not depends on the definition that you employ of religion. I've always argued on my channel, on my Angela Symposium, that paganism is a religion, and also that that is also in a way I wouldn't say political, maybe, yeah, like an activist type of stance to see paganism as a religion. Because the reason why, and this is why the ethic perspective is so important to complement the emic perspective, which is how practitioners would define themselves, is that very often the way that people use terms is determined by their understanding up until that point of the term. So for many people, especially those that would say, oh, paganism is not a religion, or what I do is not religious but is spiritual, they associate religion with dogmatism, with institution, with something that constrains you. But religion doesn't have to be that. And I would say that by challenging this definition of religion, which is pretty much determined by the main monotheisms, it is in a way for paganism to reclaim the fact that not only it is a religion to all intent and purposes, but also that the definition of religion doesn't have to be owned by the monotheisms. I mean, who's to say that religion means what resembles the three monotheisms? Religion is and has to be, in my view, in my opinion, I would argue, something that is not just a monotheism, but also something that could be polytheistic, animistic, pantheistic, with an immanent view of the divine, without a hell or a heaven. And so there are many ways that religion can be defined. And I think by people acknowledging the fact that religion is a much larger category that what monotheisms have made it to be, then I think they are participating in redefining the term, even in the general understanding of the term. And then you could argue, then why is it important? I mean, why couldn't they do that with another term like spirituality? And I would say that the reason why it's important is that religion is a social actor, is a political actor. I mean, you get funding for religious studies, you get department in religious studies, and religion is something that is really a political agent as well. So for people to fight for their rights, for instance, they might need that. They might need to to redefine and help redefining the term religion, because that is something that really participates in the co-creation of our society, and it is a category that is much more integral to our society as an active and as an active agent compared to other categories such as spirituality or way of life or philosophy, at least in the sense that it is understood in this context. So that would be why I would argue that paganism is a religion, and also it does have all the parameters that I would associate to a religion, not to a monotheistic dogmatic religion, but certainly to a religion. I mean, even if you think about the Roman religion, I was just filming an interview on Roman tradition and Roman religion. That is clearly a religion that is clearly not monotheistic and has a lot of the characteristics of contemporary paganism. In fact, the contemporary reconstructivists, they define themselves as pagans. So yeah, I would definitely say that it is a religion. Yes.
What is the difference between an eclectic and a traditional pagan or witch?
And this is also more Angela. I could have said more about religion, but I'm not as familiar with witchcraft as I am with other pagan traditions.
Okay, I can take it up. I just don't want to speak over you, so I was so the difference between eclectic witchcraft and traditional witchcraft, I'd say that it also depends on the traditions, because, for instance, when it comes to Wicca, there's I was talking with Dr. Christina Harrington, the founder of Treadwells, and she was also explaining about Wiccan, Gardnerian Wiccan. Then there's traditional witchcraft, which is another type of paganism that emerged almost in response to Gardnerian Wicca. So you also have that way of using the term traditional witchcraft. But more generally speaking, I would say that eclectic witchcraft is a type of witchcraft that incorporates elements from multiple traditions, whereas traditional witchcraft is a type of witchcraft that abides by a specific tradition. So, for instance, you get initiated into a tradition and you follow the methodology and the rituals and the deities that belong to that specific tradition. So that would be the simple way to answer the question. But the way that traditional is and eclectic are used by different practitioners can vary significantly depending on the context. But yeah, in general terms, I would say a traditional witchcraft is a witchcraft that follows a specific tradition, very often has some form of initiation or even self-initiation, and eclectic witchcraft can also have some forms of initiation. So, but it tends to be a practice that involves including elements from multiple traditions, and very often eclectic witches, for instance, are not particularly initiated into a tradition, or if they are initiated to multiple ones, and in their own personal practice, which is eclectic, they would include elements from all of these traditions to different degrees, because it has an emphasis on the practice being individually tailored, and so that it resonates with you. So it is really about what resonates with you. You will include, and that will be the eclectic practice.
It's interesting that this is really only a feature in Wicca that this question arises. Obviously, there are debates within other pagan traditions about authenticity, tradition, and all of these elements about, well, like in Druidry, like not all of them have these three classic grades of Bard, Ovate, and Druid. However, they are not contentious in the fact that these groups that decide not to have them, they don't mind other groups having them. But it's not people can blend as well. People can be in one druid group and follow those grades, and then also be in a group that doesn't have those grades quite happily.
Yeah.
So, who are the Druids, and is Druidry the indigenous religion of Europe?
Go on,
Yes.
Suzanne.
Well, yes. There are two answers. One is the historical Druids, which were around during the time of the Romans, and hence we know some observations of them from Roman sources and a few from other sources as well, from the classic period, from the ancient times. And we don't know how long Druids were existing prior to that time. So any speculation about who built Stonehenge and all of that kind of aspect, it's very likely to be people who are different from Druids because they're from thousands of years before the time of the Romans, whereas the Druids were around during the time of the Romans. And a lot can happen in 2,000 years, including a change in population. So certainly they were around in the Roman times. Then it gets a little bit debated about how much of that survived into the Christian period, when we have many mythological sources in Welsh and Irish, a little bit in other languages, that seem to incorporate, Druidic kinds of worldviews, although they don't state that they are Druidic. Some sources in Ireland have the figure of the Druid in them as well. And all of these sources that survived have become then sources for modern and contemporary Druids. And there are claims that there is a continuous tradition, although this is refuted by most scholars, including Ronald Hutton, who's the foremost scholar in British history, and particularly with regards to the Druids and other pagans. And so Druids today, they actually do not, most Druids accept these criticisms, and rather they are trying to revive a kind of a way of relating to the landscape or the deities in a way that may involve reconstruction from ancient sources. The Reconstructionist Druids try to follow more closely, of course, these texts, even though they know that they were filtered through either, the Romans or Christian Christian monks and so forth, and other sources. And really, it's about it's taking a term. The term was adopted in the early modern period by people who were interested in who built Stonehenge and Avebury and places like that. That's where the term started to be used in relation to what is around in the landscape and who were these ancient people, combined with a sense of maybe a nationalism or Celtic revivalism that came a little later, or actually during that time. But yeah, because there was a Scottish author, Bierce, who had written about the Druids in a romantic sense as well. So it involves a lot of romanticization in that time. But I'd say today, all of this is pretty well established and known that Druidry had this development, and it then branched out incredibly and internationally through different groups who've all established themselves after the Second World War during that period. And so it is not now relating necessarily to the kind of who built Stonehenge kind of question, but more as a way of relating to the world. And there isn't necessary consensus about how you do that, but generally it's respectful towards nature is a common element. And also the reverence for inspiration. And so you often find artists and musicians being very much part of Druidry, and Druidry itself inspiring the arts. And yeah, I guess it is that kind of lifestyle that is being represented by the word druid.
What is the book of Taliesin, if I pronounced that correctly?
The poetry, that is again one of these sources that have been recorded and passed down through the Welsh tradition and then translated. And there are some really interesting elements in there which have been adopted into Druidry. The birth of Taliesin in particular is one of the first things you come across if you embark on any kind of Druid training, or certainly through the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is when the cauldron, so it's a kind of a cauldron of wisdom, and that was meant, for someone else, but Gideon, I think his name was. Sorry, it's just I haven't looked at this recently. Touches this when a drop lands on his finger, and in order to escape, he transforms into different animals, and then as a hen eats a grain, and so forth. Sorry, what's the name of the mother, or the sort of one who becomes the hen, and then when Gideon becomes the grain, she swallows it and gives birth to Taliesin. So it's a kind of a remarkable birth story, who becomes a renowned poet and prophet as well, with great, a seer. And the poetry that is passed down, who is thought to be from Taliesin, includes much wisdom and insight that is used in Druidry today.
What does the pentacle symbol mean to pagans?
So the pentacle, which is the pentagram, the star within a circle, has different meanings for pagans. I would say the most common one is an identifier, so a way of telling the world I'm a pagan, so that other people can recognize me and we can befriend each other. But there are different interpretations of the meaning of the pentacle. So the 5-pointed star tends to be associated with the 4 elements, where the top one is the spirit, and the others are air, fire, water, and earth. I always forget the 4th one, and the circle around it represents the perpetuity of the cosmos, and the fact that the elements always return. There's also a famous pagan song that says earth, air, water, fire, return, return, return. So there's this idea of perpetuity that we find in the elements and in the cosmos and in our world. So it is a way of, for a lot of pagans, is a way to manifest their connection with their practice, with their craft, and also a connection with nature and an acknowledgement that their path is about connectedness. There are also other meanings to that. For instance, it is also been associated with the hermetic principle of the microcosm within the macrocosm. So the pentagram in the star would be a representative of the human being, and again the circle around it would be the representative of the cosmos, the macrocosm. So it would be the hermetic principle of the microcosm in contact with the macrocosm, and that also that one reflects the other in a way, with the very famous maxim "as above, so below," meaning that the microcosm represents the macrocosm and vice versa. But yeah, there are different meanings that have attributed through time to the pentacle, but I would say the most common is definitely that it represents an identifier for pagans and represents the elements plus the spirit within the perpetuity of this state of co-creation in which we're all in, and representation of the constant co-creation in which the elements and spirit, or the human being within the macrocosm, are immersed, is also something that symbolizes magic for a lot of pagans, because both if you intend it in the hermetic sense or in the meaning of the elements within the perpetual co-creation of the cosmos, it still implies in a way that you as an agent are part of this co-creative state, which is pretty much something that is strictly linked to magic, to the practice of magic and affecting one's reality in certain types of magic, or using these rituals to connect with the divine in different ways, depending on how it is conceptualized by the specific pagan.
Do pagans practice ritual sex?
It's funny because we were just talking about that the other day. Again, if people want to learn a bit more about the early Gardnerian Wiccan, I definitely recommend watching the interview with Christina Harrington, because it was very enlightening, and given that she has a direct contact with the lineage that traces back to Gardner. So the answer is yes, but not necessarily. So rituals, sex magic is definitely a part of esotericism and Western esotericism in general. And there's a lot of sexual symbolism in Wicca, for instance, and in other forms of paganism. So there are many rituals. Like the first that comes to mind is the Great Rite, for instance, where you have the atame, which is a sword that gets immersed into a chalice, and they are representatives of the male and female genitalia, and their connection, it represents the creation. So there's a lot of sexual symbolism, and over time the actual sexual element in pagan rituals has become more and more symbolic and less factual. But as Christina was saying the other day during an interview, even in the early days of Gardnerian Wicca, it's always been about freedom and not so much about the sex in and of itself. And it was always something consensual. So it was really about a group of people that obviously were following a very different belief system and a different worldview compared to the mainstream Christianity of the 1950s Britain. And these were people that wanted to reclaim their bodies as something sacred. And so it wasn't about sex per se, even though sex was used and could have been used and is used sometimes as a way of practicing magic. It's a very, as Aleister Crowley has very well elaborated on, sex is a very effective way, according to practitioners, to create change, and during a ritual that is intended to affect magical change. But the sexual element was, as Christina was saying, primarily a function of liberation, a sense of we've been shamed for our bodies and we want to reclaim the sacrality of our bodies. And so what we can experience with our bodies as well becomes sacred. So within an environment where people were willing to engage in that kind of activity, it was a way of exercising freedom and to reclaim the sacrality of the body. So for some pagans, there's when they do engage in sex, which is not something necessary, and normally when you go to a public pagan event, that's not going to happen. It is something that when it happens, and it's not something that necessarily happens, but when it does, it tends to happen more within private groups where there is trust and people know each other, and there are ways to establish consensual relationships. So I would say overall the answer is that in public events you won't find sex magic. So if people want to go to a pagan event, to attend an orgy, you're gonna be disappointed. But so in public event, that's not something that occurs. In private context, it can or cannot occur, and obviously it needs to be consensual among all parties involved. And if it is not, that is abuse, and that, I suppose, that can happen in all religious groups. So it's always important for people to bear that in mind, that consent is always paramount. And the fact that all the parties involved, including those not actively participating, feel comfortable with anything that is going on. But very often the sexual element has turned into symbolism. So there are often sexual symbols and symbolisms that are representing the act of creation. And these can be both used for magical purposes or for ritualistic purposes, to celebrate the seasonal changes, or to celebrate the body or get in contact with the divine. So I suppose, yeah, sex can be used in different ways, and but it's not a mandatory requirement. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, I thought it did. And for my final question, what do you both hope people will take away from this book?
Yeah, I think I was just looking through the chapters, and we cover quite a wide range, which was something that we aimed for, and we were so grateful for the contributors and that we got, and their sort of passion for putting their wisdom and interest into each one of these papers. And so I am quite proud of the book, actually, for that reason. And also in the way that we tried to approach it. So everyone who contributed, some of them, a lot of them are pagan practitioners, but not all of them. But we didn't want it to, to be obvious that it's, from an insider view in any kind of way, although, because it is a scholarly project. And this is, is very useful for, I think, opening questions about paganism for those who have a curiosity about it, but also for pagans themselves who, I don't know everything about pagans. I don't know much about Wicca, so I learned a lot about witchcraft and Wicca from what the contributors wrote about it. And so there's always something to learn, something new to follow up. And yeah, and if you are a researcher, it could offer avenues for further research as well.
As for me, I'd say, so what I would hope from that people get from this book, I think that I'd hope they would get a wider understanding of paganism, and that sparks their curiosity, so that they will want to learn more. So I hope that it is a good academic appetizer, so that people can get more into specific traditions, perhaps, and learn more about paganism. And as I said, perhaps help challenge the category of religion more generally, by realizing that there are more religions in the world than 3. So yeah, and I also find paganism endlessly fascinating. I keep looking there because that's where the book is, and for some reason I look at the book for inspiration.
Yes.
Yeah, I have it here. I'll put it here so that I stop looking at my left. So yeah, no, I just I'm very, as Suzanne said, I'm very proud of this book, and it was delightful to work on it with Suzanne, and also, all of our contributors were amazing. And so I think that it's nice to have so many contributors, because you also have different perspectives and expertise, and it's not something that you would find from another type of book on paganism, because usually a book on paganism will be written by the same author, whereas this one, because it wants to give you as a very broad and general understanding of paganism, we have lots of contributors from with different expertise, and so that hopefully helps to have the a very well-rounded understanding, at least a first taste of paganism, because it is quite a general book, so we don't go too much into details into specific traditions, but hopefully people will see that as an appetizer, and follow it up with more books on paganism, and get into the rabbit hole of pagan religions.
I mean, although it is a broad introduction, it also has some very specific contributions as well that address points of debate, or questions that some pagans might have, but also those outside the tradition, such as whether paganism is empowering for LGBTQI plus people. That might be a question that people would have. Is it a a safe place for that kind of orientation. Those kinds of orientations or different orientations, or or maybe people think that it's all about the male-female as well. But you'll find that it's quite multiple in the way that you can find different expressions of all of this. And so I think it's also for those who may mistrust paganism as well, or have a kind of been fed by media stereotypes by it, and they might have some misconceptions or negative conceptions. So we hope that it helps to ease that off as well and offer a more friendly kind of view of paganism.
Yeah, I also think the format is very helpful for people that are dipping their toes into paganism, because it's called Pagan Religions in 5 minutes, because it's sort of question and answer, and you're supposed to read every answer to each question within 5 minutes. So that's why it's called Pagan Religions in 5 minutes, because that's the format. It's sort of question and answer, very Socratic in a way. So I think it's also very easily digestible as a book, despite being an academic book. It's very very quick read, and you can move backward and forward. You don't have to read it cover to cover to understand what it is about. You can just jump to the question that you're interested in, and then later on you can go to another question that's in a different chapter. So I think it's a very easy read. So it is academic, and it is also very easy to read.
And I'd like to remind everybody that the link to purchase the book will be in the description below in the pinned comment, Pagan Religions in 5 minutes. And I'll also have the link to Angela Puca's YouTube channel, Angela Symposium, in the description below and the pinned comment as well.
Yeah,
That
you will
being said-
sorry, you
Oh, go ahead. Go
I was
finish.
saying
Go
you will
ahead.
definitely learn more about paganism on my YouTube channel, because I've got quite a few videos on that.
And Suzanne and Angela, thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jacob.
hosting. Bye.
Hello viewers, thanks for watching this video from the History Valley YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if any of you wish to further support this channel, please consider checking out this channel's Patreon page and becoming a patron, and or donate through PayPal or through Super Chat during your live stream. Thank you.